disingenuous. He stands as a beacon of truth. He is Abuki Cabal. You are listening to Abuki Cabal.
Welcome to the Abuki Cabal Show.
The only way that we get a black perspective on anything or political, regular news, whatever the case may be, it comes through the filter of now black women. And only black women, but all you hear is, that everything was about, inclusion. But apparently inclusion doesn't include black men. Diversity doesn't include black men. And, I'm going to, take a look at, some of that, and we're going to kind of discuss, what I found when I dug around, just looking around, just, popping out questions that, that one would have as you look at this subject. Like a lot of different fields, and this kind of bleeds into, education and whatnot. The focus on, like my last show, we talked about, the focus being, almost primarily on black women and their upliftment, educationally, monetarily, through jobs and whatnot. You always hear about this, this pay gap, this wage, gender wage gap and all this, and they always put that black face in front of you, even though the programs that are out there are not really, we're not benefiting from them, and the mouthpieces for these programs have more often than not been black women, who are, by their own admission, among the most educated, but they don't speak to the fact that, we're educated and we're getting all these opportunities, but at the same time, other people are coming in and stealing from these from the opportunities that are meant for black people. It seems like we've taken many steps backwards. We had. I want you guys to just think about, when was the last time you saw a respectable black male journalist who was presenting the news in a way that was not the same thing that the female commentators on other segments was talking about, the same things that they're directing you to think is important and that you should be focusing on. The news stopped being reported on and started becoming the same as what Fox News was doing, which was entertainment, and that's how they tried to beat a lot of the scrutiny that befell them during the situation with, when Trump lost his election to Joe Biden. And we had all of the, the situation up in Washington, everybody, losing their minds and doing a whole bunch of stuff. But a lot of that stuff was stoked because of the supposed, inequities in reporting. We just had a hearing with Congress where they were talking about, the fact that, Republicans are saying that it's not equal. They don't. A lot of CNN, MSNBC, and these places they don't hire conservatives. When they do have conservatives, they know that they have conservatives on the staff, but conservatives tend to, I think, go where they are welcomed the most, where they can, do what they do. When they are displeased with what's going on, they're going to go to Fox because Fox is going to allow them to do and say whatever they want to say. Now, do I agree with some of the things that I'm seeing here since the election, because some of this stuff needed to be rolled back. Am I a Trump supporter? No, I can't say that I am, but I am an objective observer in this, and I've tried to step back and take my feelings out of it and look at what is actually going on and what is actually being pulled back. And it amazes me that in order for us to get objective commentary and news, we have to come to YouTube and other platforms that are not associated with the news. And not so far back, Black women were making fun of us for the types of opinions that we had, what we were saying. And the Black men who were on these programs, they would basically just parrot the same things that these women are saying, that we're incels, that we are people who shouldn't be listened to, that we are these people who hate women, and all these other types of responses that came from it, which was not objective reporting. Your job would have been to come down and talk to the men to see where they were coming from, which that started happening later on. But the objective was to basically make men look bad, make Black men look bad. This goes back into, Dr. Neal did a show last week where he was talking about, are Black men seen as masculine figures in our community? And this is part of the problem. They don't even see us as worthy of even speaking on platforms. All you see on these platforms is a Black woman yelling at the white men, trying to get those white men told. And, this reminds me of what happened in the election. Black women really thought that white folks and white women were going to really vote with them. And that has only happened maybe a couple of times in history. In the history of voting in this country, have white women voted against, white men and what they were pretty much voting for. That has only happened a couple of times, So, in looking at that, it's like, it's disparaging. But I can go on and on about this. I don't want to go on too much on the introduction. I want to go ahead and get to it. And what some of the questions that I was basically asking was simply this. I asked, okay, why is it that we're not seeing a lot of these Black males? And has there been a decline? Is this just me? Is this just, am I just not seeing these Black folks? Are they moved to different, time frames when I'm not looking? And basically what I came up with was that basically it was a decline in the late 2010s and the early 2020s, and there was a sharper decline after 2020, and basically, what it was saying is that some of the key things that caused that are contributed to that decline is the 2020 election cycle. And basically the heightened focus on racial justice in 2020, like George Floyd and BLM, all of those things, again, key moments that were uniquely suffered by Black men, saw an increase in political commentators that were other than Black men. And, that leaked into political coverage, shifting in 2022, the midterms in 2024, in the 2024 presidential race, Black male analysts, were sidelined, in favor of the recurring white journalists and non-Black commentators, Also, there was some network restructuring and layoffs and editorial shifts at CNN under former CEO Chris Licht, Licht. I don't know if I'm spelling that. I'm pronouncing that correctly. And also MSNBC led to the reduction in Black male contributors. So, why did they get rid of, if we're focusing on all of these issues that are exclusive to Black males, why do we see the CEOs starting to get rid of Black contributors and commentators? You also see this shift towards centrist ideals and bipartisan panels, this kumbayaism that was going on, even though that was not what was going on in the country. So, some of the networks started aiming for a perceived ideological balance, and prioritizing white conservative and liberal voices over Black male perspectives. Unless the topic is explicitly about race, then Black men were not included, and I would dare say that that the only voices that were in were Black female voices. Black women won off of, again, the dead bodies of these Black men who suffered, during the George Floyd situation. Black man dies. Black women get a come up, BLM situation happened. Black men get murdered. Black women get the come up. They form an organization that doesn't benefit Black men. And they go so far as to basically put it into their mission statement that they are not going to do anything for Black men. But every time, somebody says something about it, then it's like we're doing, like I said, the pulse of the Black community is always being checked by how good Black women are doing. They don't give a damn how Black men are doing, how Black boys are doing, but they will put their finger on the carotid of Black women, and if they got a pulse, they think that the Black community is doing just fine. And then when they ask, what does the Black community need? They walk right past the Black men and go right to the Black women and ask them what they need. And you know what they say? More stuff for us. The Ice Cube effect, what are you doing for Black women? Ice Cube's talking about Black people. They're talking about, what are you doing for Black women? So then we ask ourselves, why is this happening? Okay. So then there's several factors, that may explain this decline, and this is their rationale, okay? They're saying they're basically typecasting of Black voices. Black male commentators are often pigeonholed into discussions about race, policing, or civil rights, rather than being seen as general political analysts. That's geopolitics or, local politics or national politics. They don't want to talk to us about those types of things. And if you're a Black man and you come out and you speak about things like what's going on in Israel, let me just say, when was the last time you saw a black male commentator being asked about what he thought about what's going on in Ukraine or in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You don't see them being asked about that at all. No, not at all, because what could this black man possibly know about any of that? You know, there are a couple of them I think that have come to that have been, you know, moved to a respected position, and I have some pictures of some of them, and I can't remember his name right off, but I'm going to show you him, and I like seeing him on there because you can pretty much ask him about anything, and he can give his point of view on it, and it's in line with pretty much what's going on, you know. But this position that you know, black men can only talk about things that are you know, pretty much the same issues from the civil rights era. You know, look, I look like in the civil rights era to a beachhead. You know, say you're in the Marines, and then you know, you hit the beach, you form a beachhead. You put all your equipment there. You lock that area down, and you project your power and your strength from that beach, but you got to secure that beach first. That's what the 60s were for us. We secured a beachhead, and we were supposed to move out from there, but they're not allowing us to move out from there. They're keeping us in the same place, you know, same place. The Congressional Black Caucus keeping us in the same place. And then when you hear them talking, they're talking about doing stuff for the others, not for black people, but for the others, you know? That's code language for the people that's paying them, you know? And they want more seats for black women in Congress, in the Senate. They ain't talking about more black people. They're talking about black women. Because somehow black women are gonna, well, you know, it's like this trickle down effect. If you get the black women in that situation, then they're gonna automatically advocate for the rest of us. But that has not been the case. You know, we can't track that at all, because if you track it from the 70s on up to now, the elevation has been clearly in the other direction, and not with us. Not with the community, you know. And what are black men saying? Black men just keep screaming out, "It ain't the way I wanted it!" Where's my help? You know, black men are out here advocating for the community, advocating for, you know, their inclusion. Where's their inclusion? You know, where's their, you know, educational benefits? Where's all of that? Because I don't know if you guys know it, but the numbers of black men who are being enrolled in medical schools is down, in law schools is down, you know, in journalism is down. You know, I think I covered a little bit of that last time. I think I'm gonna be covering a little bit more about education here in the next one, you know, and how we're being affected, because, you know, this question is complex about, you know, how this is affecting us, how this is affecting masculinity. You know, there was just a show that was just on where a guy just basically just went off on this gay guy, because the gay guy came out and started trying to tell him how to think. You know, how he should, you know, how he was a toxic masculinist and all of that. And because he didn't share the same views as him, and he went off on him. You know, who made you thought police? You know, some of that should have been happening back in the 2010s, you know, up to the 2024s, but none of that was present. And it has harmed us. It has harmed black masculinity, how we are viewed. You know, Anthony Mackie just talked about that, how we are viewed in movies, how we're viewed in media, you know, whether we are listened to about things that are relevant in the world. You know, I think we've earned our place in the world to be able to speak on some of these things, you know. So, you know, here's the second one: prioritization of white conservative voices. You still see that now. White conservative voices are at the forefront of what we should think is important, you know. There is no balance in the networks. You know, yes, there has been a lot of bias towards the left-hand side, you know, and it's been, you know, feminist influenced and very woman-esque, okay? But in the efforts of these networks to appear balanced, they frequently pair white liberals and white conservatives together, and they have black women in either the top spot, or she's amongst the other ones. And like I said, she's getting these men told, but they over time. There were fewer and fewer slots for black men unless they fit a specific narrative. So that's what we've seen. We've seen a fall off, and that's true, And this is going to have repercussions. That pendulum that has swung back from the LGBTQ push and the feminist push, to the point to where now they're getting rid of all of the DEI stuff. Well, how do you think these white women are going to feel? And these white men are going to feel about every time they are on a show, they're being told off by some black woman, who basically all of them say that the angry black woman trope is just is a falsehood, is something that's just a fake narrative about them. But every time you see them on TV, they're screaming and hollering and talking crazy to these people. I mean, it's not the type of debate. You go back and you look at some of the old television debates that were on TV, where people who had different points of view in a broad spectrum, and none of them spoke like this. They had all female panels. None of them spoke this way. The professionalism has gone out the window, and the ratchet has been turned up to maximum. And then the black men that you see on there, the Mark Lamont Hills and whatnot, they sound just like the women. You have Mark Lamont Hill is a PhD, and he's on there, and he can't even define what a woman is. He's telling you that black men in the community, in the black male community, in the black community, need to be more inclusive and more accepting of all of this gay stuff and all this stuff. But then out on the street, black men are saying, this is not us. You guys are all this portrayals that you guys are doing. We're not with that at all. And they came out in this election and said that very thing. We're not with all of this. This is not coming from us. But nobody listened, and part of it is because the news media, involved in its own bit of social engineering, was pointing everybody's heads in the direction that they wanted them to go, just like Disney and everybody else, pointing you in the direction to the hill that the Democratic Party died on. And that was over a bunch of social policies and this futuristic land that they wanted to project. That nobody asked for. Nobody's asking for that. Nobody's was looking for that or checking for that at all. But it's coming from these news folks, And on the other end of the spectrum, you got Fox News. There ain't no black folks over there. Ain't no black men over there that are really talking about the same things that we're talking about. People jumped on board because it was I would rather go on this one over here where I'm gonna stick with the devil that I know, and that's what happened. So we go on down, and there was a departure from high profile figures. The prominent black male commentators that we used to have, they all just somehow disappeared, and they were replaced with the Mark Lamont Hills and the Jason Johnson, and they left the mainstream media networks due to controversies or dissatisfaction, or basically the editors wanted to go in a different direction. And we see the results of that different direction. A lot of that was because they were trying to, like I said, mimic Fox News and become more of these commentators and these entertainers rather than just reporting the news. So then we had a situation where the news is being interpreted for us. And they got a lot wrong. And Fox is steady chugging along. Like I said, they just had that that congressional hearing up there, and they were like, basically, the left was lying on President Trump and doing all of this other stuff, and doing all this un-American activity. So now they're going through and they're defunding their networks. Talking about doing things to their networks, and I think this is in retaliation to when Fox got tagged for basically doing false reporting, which got a bunch of people, hyped up to march on Washington. So now they're going back and they're hitting up MSNBC, CNN, all these shows. And you see where access to the White House is only being given to people who are pretty much positive towards the administration. So scrutiny nowadays, because they push so far in the other direction, now there is no balance. So now there's going to be some pain associated with this, and they never seem to have the foresight to see that if we do this, what might happen as a result of us doing this. And just because we can do this, should we do this? Is this a good thing for us if we do this? All of the talk was about getting everything equal, for women. And now we see all of the numbers are showing that there is no equality. There's no equity. They seek supremacy, and that's what we're seeing. They replace the men that used to be there instead of being added to the repertoire. Okay, so then we have this audience. Diversity efforts, focusing elsewhere. It says while some networks have increased black female representation like Joy Reid and Simone Sanders, black men have not seen proportional gains. I'll say that again. They put all these black women up there, and it says black men have not seen proportional gains. So black women were put up into these spots, and black men suffered as a result of it. So some of the same things that we've seen historically, where black women were elevated, and black men were put in subservient situations where they would deal with the black woman, but wouldn't deal with the black man. The black man is never seen as in a position of authority in his community or over his family, for that matter. Okay. So then we go back to the last one where it talks about audience demographics and perceived appeal. Okay, some of these producers may have wrongly assumed that black male voices don't resonate with broader audiences unless tied to specific issues. So there where we go, where we start talking about how they guided what you said when you got up there. You couldn't really say what you really thought or what you, whatever segment that they were in that they did not want you to have commentary on. You couldn't really chime in on that, and that was by design. So then, we asked, okay, where was the pushback? Was anybody saying anything? And, did they write anything? Did they do any kind of, op-eds or anything, talking about, this fall off in journalism and black men being visible in journalism, and the critics of what was going on were watchdog groups like the NAACP. But then you saw in my last show that the NAACP was also funding anti-black male efforts, like the stuff that was going on with GLAAD. So they were funding and advocating for a lot of things that were on the other end of the spectrum, negatively impacting black masculinity and the black male image in general. Okay? And they have another one, Color of Change, have called out networks for this trend. Social media campaigns like Black Men on TV have also highlighted the lack of representation. Okay? So while Black male voices remain present in political media, their visibility on mainstream news panels has decreased since the early 2020s. Partly due to editorial choices, structural bias, and shifting network priorities and policies. The trend reflects broader issues of representation in political journalism, where Black men are often marginalized unless the topic is explicitly race-related, like we said earlier. Okay? So, I got some other information here, and I've got a couple of articles that we're gonna look at. So let me cue that up. Okay. All right. Here's the article that I found. And it's got a list of all the Black CNN anchors and reporters to watch in 2024. Okay, and they've got old Don Lemon up there. You know, they've got this young man here. His name, well, he's out of Montreal, Canada. So that I kind of take issue with. I mean, you have a guy who's here and he's, commentator in Atlanta, CNN International. He's not from here. So what are the odds of him talking about things that are going to be relevant to Black men here stateside? He's his active years of 2015 to present. Okay, he's 48 years old. Okay, we got Victor Blackwell. Okay, Victor does, he's good sometimes. I see him on here, but I mean, anybody looking for Victor? To see what Victor's talking about? Probably not, Okay. Victor's 42, out of Baltimore, Maryland. I would think that Victor would be talking about some of these things, when there's rarely any pushback when it comes down to some of these things that these women say on the panels, and then there's never any, Black men on the street are saying that this is important to them, and Black men on the Black community is not really, saying that this is the direction that we want to go. No, it's not that. They chime in right along with them as if, yeah, this is where everything needs to go. So it's just a go along and get along gang, on CNN with the Black folks that you see. Okay. And let's move on down. So there we see Zane EG4 Asher, Black woman. She's 40. She's from London. Okay. 2012 to present. Okay. She's doing geo news, so world news. Okay. So we got Audie Cornish. Okay. 1979. She's 44 years old. She is from Randolph, Massachusetts. 2022 to present. Okay. So you have another Black woman. Okay. Then you have Van Jones, crying Van Jones. Van gets on and goes to crying and, begging people to like us and all that stuff. I don't know very many Black men who relate to Van Jones, Van used to be, a pro-black that was all into protesting and doing a whole bunch of things, but now he's on TV, and when Van Jones is talking about stuff on TV, it's not even close, not even remotely close to what's relevant, to us. And we're out here, talking every day about things that are important to us. Van is all for the others and trying to be liked by conservatives and people who don't like, black folks and whatnot. And, and he's an advocate for women, black women and all of that too. So, yeah, Van used to be on Crossfire and, used to do some other things. He had a somewhat respectable come up, but then, he has gotten soft, Abby Phillips, okay? Here she is, 36 years old, from Virginia, 2017 to present. Moved right on up there to the top, past all those men that have been active for longer than she's been active, okay? There you got Jason Carroll, watched Jason for a little while. And he was doing pretty good, but as far as talking about things, again, that were relevant, I did not see that coming from the black men who are being picked, to be the voice of black folks up there, because that's what it comes down to. It's just like what Anthony Mackie said, you are chosen. They pick you out of a group of others, and they say, I want you. And most of the time it's because you can be controlled. You're not going to make very many waves. So then we got this young lady here, Nima El-Bagir. She's 45 years old. She's from Sudan. She's Sudanese. Been there 2011 to present, Chief International Investigative Correspondent, okay? Here you have this guy, Larry Madowu. He's 36 years old. He's from Kenya, 2021 to present, African voice change makers. These are people that we're supposed to be watching, because they're on the come up. Renee Marsh, 17th, well, not 17th April, that's her birthday, but she's 42 years old. She's from Binghamton, New York, 2012 to present, national correspondent, okay? So here's another one, Ryan Young, 49 years old, out of Miami, Florida, 2015 to present. He's also a CNN national correspondent. Never seen him before. Okay, so I've seen her. This young lady here, Isha Isatu Cisse. She is 48 years old and she's out of London. Does a pretty good job, probably because she's from London. Her commentary and her coverage is a little different. Okay. All right, so then we got Don Lemon again, and we know how, we know what's up with Don. Don, he's one of the groups that they're putting up there. And let's move on to some of the other stuff that I have here. Okay. Here's an article on, and this is from some of the dates that we were talking about. Here you got November 2021 to 2020. Opinion, diversity in the media is something we need to keep seeing. Remember when they were talking about those dates, when they were pushing all of these people, to the forefront to talk about these things? This is various networks, ABC, CNBC, MSNBC, all these news networks, and morning shows and whatnot. And we name them off. You got white women up here, you got black women up here, and there's none of us up here. There's not even any white men up there. So there's just been this push for everything to come through a feminist filter, and it is blaring, but it's only blaring if you really are paying attention. Most of us, we got lives, we got jobs, we're working. we're not really not paying attention to some of these things. But when you listen to what a lot of these women are saying and what they're pushing, like Joy Reid was fired. Sitting up there arguing with a woman over whether a child should be able to read a book about, essaying and all kind of explicit sexual acts and whatnot in grade school, and just kept badgering the lady, and that's supposed to be important to the Black community. I don't understand it. She thought she was crying, saying her show was relevant. In what way? All you did, you were basically a wrecking ball for those people to basically try to trash the Republican Party, but you didn't push anything for our community. You weren't a Black voice up there. I dare say none of these women up here have said anything that was representative of the suffering and the struggle that is still going on with Black folks. And then when Black men say that they have no voice, then somehow we're being disparaged and told that we're crazy and we're incels and we're anti-woman and anti-gay and all this other misogynistic, all of this destruction of the patriarchy and whatnot. Black men were the first victims of the patriarchy. It's documented. It was written down, but they don't talk about that. So let's go. Let's look at this article. This article isn't very long, but we'll look at it. But basically, what they were doing was basically trying to position all of these women after George Floyd and and BLM and all of these deals where it looked like Black men were actually going to be in a position to make some changes in policing and in some other areas. That didn't happen. We were effectively moved aside. Okay. So those are the faces that you see, and here's we'll go ahead and we'll read this one. The representation is a tricky thing. Throughout American history, it was apparent that white straight men were the ideal candidates for our television screen. Now things are different. Women of all races, sexualities, and backgrounds are shrinking the gap between male and female journalists on our news channels. News networks like CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and ABC, and countless others covered in the 2020 presidential election, and reporters were working around the clock to provide reliable information and predictions to the public. While watching, the number of female anchors and reporters stood out to me. As both a female journalist, seeing women in positions of power in news coverage is motivational. This is a reason why we need more representation in television. Like myself, many others are watching the news channels, and the more diverse it is, the farther representation spans. Do you get that? So they had representation, but they always want more. It's always more. It's never enough for you to have, if it's two of them on there and then there are two men, two Black women, or a Black woman and a Black man, white woman and a white man, that's not enough. You got to have more women and less men so that we can get a diverse, opinion on what's going on. So, she goes on to say, in the past couple of years, women have been taking more and more major positions in television broadcasting. According to the Associated Press in 2019, Men and women are pretty evenly split in MSNBC and CNN, while others have a wider gap in companies like Fox, with women representing 30% of the staff. Many newspapers like the New York Times and Washington Post are similar to Fox News in the sense their male staff significantly outnumbers their female staff. These statistics are especially interesting because even with the gender gap, in many news broadcasting companies, the amount of on-screen female anchors is noticeable. For example, on the Today Show, Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Khattab are the first female anchor duo to lead the show. When you click with someone, man, woman, it doesn't matter. If it works, it works, Khattab told People magazine about working with Guthrie. We're sort of like sisters, okay? Khattab and Guthrie are two of many groundbreaking women in our media. On our morning news shows, like Good Morning America with Robin Roberts and CBS This Morning with Gayle King, both African-American women, go live on television to bring the morning news to America. Okay? I don't even have to go into, Kale and her, she doesn't care whether the people that she interviews lies, whatever. She just puts them on there. Then she shirks the responsibility. It's not my responsibility that Megan Thee Stallion lied. I just, everybody wanted to hear her story. Everybody wanted to resonate with Megan Thee Stallion. That was her response. Okay, so it goes on to say MSNBC correspondent and TV host Joy Reid recently received primetime slots for her new show, The Ride Out, a couple of months ago. We know how that turned out. I'm honored and thankful for this opportunity, Reid said. I'll always be proud of the network of the work we did on AM Joy. But pushing the envelope and tracking pragmatic conversations, I'm eager to carry the same energy into the 7 p.m. hour, where we can continue to build on bringing in diverse, smart, and accomplished voices to the table on topics that are important to our viewers. Well, that wasn't the case because the viewers didn't care about what she was talking about. She didn't have the numbers, and she was 86th. They got rid of Joy, and they ended up doing massive restructuring only after Trump won the election. Everybody started seeing the light then all of a sudden, there was we're probably going in the wrong direction. But we've been saying this forever in this space. We've been saying this forever, that there is that this push towards this woman-centric viewpoint on everything is destroying the integrity of news. It's destroying the integrity of a lot of things: education, psychology, sociology, medicine. It's destroying it because there is no objectivity in it. It's only, we want our side of the story being told, and we want to eradicate the historical male presence in whatever it is, whatever the topic is, even in movies. I did a show a long time ago about the network that was exclusively, for women. And all these women went just flocked to this show, and it was totally done by feminists. The name escapes me now because I don't really watch that stuff anymore. But if you go back, look at my my history, you'll see where I did that on that woman's network. I can't remember what the name of the network is, and please forgive me for this. Brain's just slipping on this, but every show on there was dealing with some type of essay, some type of grape, and it just shoveled that into women forever. And it was like a script to teach women how to interact with men from a feminist perspective, a feminist anti-male perspective that was shoveled to these people for decades. We look at Oprah and how she basically decimated black men with The Color Purple. And scholars came out and told her how bad it was, went on Donahue and other platforms saying that basically, this is going to have a detrimental effect. But they didn't care because they were making money and women love drama. So they made their money. So now we're all paying for it on the back end. It's a script, and they all say the same thing. We're not making any money. We used to not be able to get an education. We used to not be able to have bank accounts. But when you go and you look at that, that's all fraudulent. But most people don't go and look this stuff up because they know that people are not going to read. People are not going to do this. People's attention span is what? As long as a TikTok video? Okay. So here we go. So there's a significant amount of female White House correspondents behind the camera, as well. Kristen Welker and Haley Jackson are currently correspondents for NBC News, Jackson being NBC's chief correspondent. Yes. You're sleeping for hours, for 4 hours, sleeping 4 hours a night. And you can't run the risk of putting your phone down, Jackson said in an MSNBC interview, on being the network chief White House correspondent in the midst of the 2020 presidential election. It is 100% exhausting, but it's also exhilarating. It's an opportunity to witness this extraordinary moment in history. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's real. As a previous White House correspondent in 2017, Caitlin Collins was banned from the event with President Trump for asking inappropriate questions. They said that the question I asked were inappropriate for that venue, and they said I was shouting, Collins said on CNN days after. Collins' ban was heavily discussed by both the left and the right media platforms, and she received support from her fellow CNN news anchor Jake Tapper. Okay. Throughout America's history, there have been very few female moderators for national debates. Only recently have more women been invited to moderate without the inclusion of a male moderator. So see, they don't even want you there. They want to be there by themselves, because they feel like if a man is there, I guess they have training wheels on, So that's just crazy. That's crazy. It'd be like a black man saying up there, I don't want the white man here because, it diminishes my importance. Can we make that happen? Imagine if a black man said that. You think that would happen? This stuff is just ludicrous. So it goes on to say, let's see. Without the inclusion of a male moderator. For the 2016 presidential election, Gwen Ifill and Judy Woodruff made history, become the first women to moderate a debate without the assistance of a male moderator. This situation is similar to that of the 2020 Democratic debate, where 4 women moderated: Rachel Maddow, Kristen Welker, Andrea Mitchell, and Ashley Parker, all of whom are seasoned journalists in their respective networks. Okay, MSNBC news anchor Rachel Maddow made history being the first openly gay host of a primetime news program in the United States with the Rachel Maddow Show. Okay. I mean, if anybody's ever watched Rachel is, she's pretty good, but at the same time, there is this you're dumber than me type of reporting, and that she does. It's almost like a comical aspect to it, and it's I think it diminishes the fact that it's a news program, and we're seeing that with a lot of the interaction between a lot of you look at the black woman that every time they show a black woman in a segment, it's because she is either talking crazy, to the other side, in a way that's just it's the sassy type of depiction. It's not, the reserved type of affect that you saw with like a Condoleezza Rice or any of that. There's the respectability that's supposed to go with you holding a position like that. Well, you're not seeing any of that because the types of people that they're putting up there basically support this, this feminist narrative of we're just as good as you, if not better, and we're going to show you, and we don't want you up here while we're up here so that we can present it the way that we want to present it and give us our own shows so that we can show you that we can succeed. And this is all pre the destruction that came after that. And you see what the whole gist of the story is all, well, the women first here, and we've got more women here, and we're more and more women there, and can we get more and more and more women into the process? Can we just have women, we can't say female anymore. You can't say female, camera one person, and also the commentators got to be female. Let's just make the whole damn newsroom female. Is that equitable? Is that equality? Is that inclusion? No, that's exclusion. We want to exclude all of these males because they have historically, had the run of the place. But I thought that the whole premise of this was about equality, equal representation. If you can do the job, let me get up here and do the job. It wasn't move these people out of the way so that I can be in the spotlight. Or am I getting this wrong? You guys, let me know in the comments if I'm getting this wrong. I mean, this is my perception of looking back at this historically and reading what they were saying during that time. Okay, so let's move on. So getting a show on the air, even all these years in, is like merging onto a freeway at 80 miles an hour at night in a rainstorm with no headlights and no windshield wipers, and a bunch of semi trucks coming up right behind me, Maddow said in an interview with The Guardian. Somebody telling me that they don't like the color of my car. I am not focusing on you. I've got a job to do here. Yeah, I don't believe that. Okay, Welker, along with moderating, I don't think that's right, moderating, I think, the national Democratic debates, was the sole moderator for the last 2020 presidential debate and received praise for both candidates on her job, from both candidates on her job. On the Today Show, Welker talked about her experience moderating such an important debate. She said, I'd been envisioning that moment for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I thought if I could just breathe and talk, I'd get through the whole night. She said a couple of days after. Okay, the CNN reporter and correspondent Abby Phillip also co-moderated the Democratic debate in the beginning of the year, but she also was a significant part of the 2020 election coverage, along with Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. Phillip and Bash outnumbered their male co-workers 2-1 in a truly refreshing sight. So it's refreshing for you to see more women than men on the television. Okay, I don't see where that is as relevant as it needs to be. If it was one woman up there and she did a good job, that would be significant. If it was two, it would be significant. But for them to outnumber the men, you see where this is going. You see what's important to them and what should be important to them are two different things. As journalists and news people, okay, you don't even hear the same things coming out of men's mouths. So she goes on to say, to see more female anchors than men on television makes me believe that times are changing and that they are changing for the better in America. So female superiority on television is going to make her feel like times are better. You know, imagine if black people said, you know, I'm feeling great because everybody up there was black, you know, and you know, we just took over. We took over the whole thing. How do you think that would go over? I don't think that would go over very well at all. You know. And really, you have to really, you know, what she's really saying is that, you know, she's saying women up there, you know, it's okay that there's a couple of black women in there, but really what she's saying is white women, you know, and this is as evidenced by, you know, white women's come up with affirmative action more than black folks. White women's come up with DEI more than black women, black men, the gay folks that came up in it too. But I really think that the DEI thing was more for the benefit of the gay folks than it was, and the white women, than it was for any of us. Although they did get some benefit, but we'll get into that. Okay, so here the number of women I see on the news is only a fraction of the women behind the scenes working as political analysts and journalists. And while there are many now, there can always be more. You see what I'm saying? It's never enough. Never enough. And this goes into what, you know, Dr. Neal was talking about on his show as well. You know, how you go and you're at the poker table, you're winning, you know, you got tons of money there, but you got to play one more hand. You got to know when to get up from the table because you won. I mean, you can't keep winning. And then you have to, you know, acknowledge your winnings and the possibility of defeat. But you see, they can't do that. They don't have the ability to say enough is enough. It's like the woman store story, you know. And I know y'all know what the woman store, you know, joke is, where, you know, they go into the woman's store, you know, she's looking for her husband, you know, it's several floors. She keeps going through each one of the floors. Each one of the men have you know, a better, more and more of the traits that she wants, but she has to keep going because she thinks she's going to get better. And then when she gets to the top, ain't no more men left. This is the same type of thought process. The same type of thought process. Okay. So here's the last little part. I believe that it is important for everyone to have representation. Do you? I don't think so, because you're talking about representation of women only. And she goes on to say, it's important for little girls to watch TV and see an openly gay anchor. So there you go. You had to put some gay in there. A Muslim senator, a black vice president, and be able to dream about having a career like their female role models. Then we swing right back around to the woman. Add all of that in between. You got on the top bun is women and little girls, and in the bottom bun is female role models. And everything in the middle is gay and others. Okay, I'll add this in the description also. So let's look at the faces of the leadership. The newsroom leadership has never been this diverse, but that's not enough. You see what I'm saying? Here it is, the same thing. Now this article is. This is 2021. So you remember when they were saying that, you know, this stuff happened in 2010 to the 2020s. Here you have 2020 and 2021. And she's still saying that we need more. Okay. I ain't going to play that. That's reliable sources. But look what more looks like. See any black men in that? See one. You see all those black women? See that? A couple of white women in there. And then you got some others in there. See that? That's what they want. That's what inclusion looks like for them. You know, might be a trans in there. You know, they count them as women too. You know, but your black male voice is irrelevant. I'm not going to read this. I'll let you guys go through and read that. But I just wanted to show you the faces that they show you, because pretty much, you know, people who are not going to read this, they look and go, inclusion. And then they see all of these women. And the one older black man there. You know, that's what that's what they want. Okay, so here is a article on Black media powerhouses, 10 African American journalists to watch. This was 2021. So this is who they were telling you to watch. Yamiche Alcindor on PBS. Got her. You got Gayle King. Yeah. They put her out there, pushed her up front. Got Hoda Khattab down here. Let me take that back. That was, yeah. Nia Melka Henderson. I didn't say her. Yeah, she's there. Washington Post Politico. Okay. Got Gayle King, Hoda Khattab. Okay. You got Don Lemon again. You notice the man that they put in there? You see that? You got a gay man in there. You got a bunch of women in there, a bunch of black women, you know, in there. Then you got Mark Lamont Hill, who openly supports a bunch of, you know, trans idealism, you know, and, you know, you can change into whatever you believe that you are, but he's a PhD. You know, I thought for you to be a PhD, you had to deal with reality and research and whatnot. But, you know, I have a lot of problems with Mark Lamont Hill, you know. But again, when Mark Lamont Hill came out and made statements about Israel, he was 86 from CNN. You know, he pretty much couldn't even get a commentator job for a little while because they just wouldn't let him come out there. Somehow he got back on, and he's back on now. I think he's with Al Jazeera now. Okay, you got Clarence Page. Clarence Page was the guy that I was talking about. Clarence he's respectable. You know, when they talk to him about politics, he's been talking about politics for quite a few years. When you hear Clarence talk, Clarence has that respectability of a journalist that you expect to hear from. You know, when he doesn't know something, he steps back from it. He doesn't have any information on that. You know, very respectable man. I like Clarence. Okay. So then you got Robin Roberts, you know, again, they're pushing a gay person, and you know, she's black too. So that's, you know, a double win for them, you know. Eugene Robinson, he's good too. I like him too. He does pretty well. His commentary is pretty good, and he's done some good work. So those are two that I support. You know, I don't know who Darlene Superville, you know, is, but here you have another black woman. Okay, so these are the people that they're telling us to watch. Okay, I don't have very much of a problem with that one. There's another one I'll put here. There's a Hall of Fame of National Black Journalists. And I will put that so you guys can read that. But as you can see, the 2024 inductees, almost all women. Almost all women. You know, and I think it trends with the same, you know, types of ideology pushes that you see in the industry, you know, from these outside sources. Like I said, you know, there's a lot of social engineering that's going on here, and they feel that it's their duty to get you to change the way you think and who you consider to be reputable and how we should be moving forward as a society. Okay, I'll let you guys, you know, take a look at that, and we won't go through that. And then I'm going to go to the article that I think is the most important is, where are all of the black male journalists? One of the many professional panels that took place at the NABJ, the same group that I was just talking about, National Association of Black Journalists, you know, this year focused on the absence, and this is in August 3rd, 2024, the absence of black male journalists in many American newsrooms. Okay? So here we go. Like I said, the NABJ, which took place at the Hilton, Chicago, featured a number of panels within many conference rooms and halls of the large hotel. Black journalists from all over the country filled those rooms during the 5-day annual conference. The majority of the black journalists were female. Okay. So Pew Research Center data shows that 46% of professional journalists in the United States are male. Okay. On Saturday, August 3rd, the panel Disappearing Act, Where Have All of the Black Male Journalists Gone? And the assembled panelists attempted to answer that question. Okay. Sorry, I lost my place. Attempted to answer that question. The panel took place on the lower level of the hotel, which was virtually empty in comparison to all of the tables that were around during the much anticipated job fair that ended a day earlier. Despite the quiet surroundings, the small room was full of black men and women by the time of the 3 p.m. scheduled start time. Okay, there's a picture of it. Okay. So then it goes on to say that journalist Rod Carter, a broadcaster with NBC, Marlon Walker, a former reporter in Atlanta, and currently managing editor in charge of starting new newsrooms around the country for the Marshall Project, Leon Tucker, the DEI director with Garnet, and Palm Beach Post executive director Rick Christie were the panelists for the afternoon session. All black men, all having their own journeys throughout journalism, took a moment to share their backgrounds before beginning what was a most anticipated panel. All 4 men remember teachers inside middle school and high school recognizing their talents and encouraging them to pursue journalism. All 4 men also said that those educators were white men and women. None of them said they had a black male journalism influence early on. The good news is that they did in college and beyond. 3 of the 4 men attended Florida A&M University in Tallahassee and studied journalism. Okay, I stayed with journalism because I noticed that my community wasn't as well informed as it should be, Christie said. The only panelist that did not attend Florida A&M said he says he doesn't see many other black male students at his alma mater, the University of Florida, when he goes back to speak to students at the journalism school. He says, we need to be in the room, Christie said. The biggest impact to me is that we aren't always in the room. Okay, this is some of the same arguments that women are saying, black women are saying, we're not in the room, we don't have a say, we're not being represented. But no one's talking about this problem other than black men talking about why is it that black men are pretty much being eradicated from view. And it's all been orchestrated. Okay. So it goes on to say, all 4 men shared experiences with being one of the only black men in the newsrooms that they worked in. They talked about teachable moments that they all still see examples of in their current positions of leadership. Other topics of discussion include paying reporters higher salaries to make for more desirable career options and pitching black-specific stories in your newsroom, even if they are the only ones that are doing it. On the lack of desirable salaries, Tucker said, that is a huge problem in attracting talent of color, because black people need to be paid. You know, black people are trying to get out of poverty. They're not trying to work in poverty, you know, and that's a problem. You know, same thing applies for teaching as well, you know. So he goes on to say, when speaking of ways to encourage very young black males to get into journalism, Christie said they should be encouraged to read. BGS talks about this all the time. Dr. Tia San Johnson talks about this all the time. You know, Dr. Neal talks about this all the time. We need to read. We need to make reading a normal, everyday part of our our process for the day. We need to read, and not just some mess. You need to read some things that are important, things that develop you as a man, things that you need to read some philosophy. You need to read some sociology. You need to read some psychology. You know, you need to keep up on medical things. You know, you need to keep up on technology. You know, things that these things. If you read these things will make you a more well-rounded person. And you will not be the type of person who will be susceptible to propaganda, because you'll be able to see through it. You'll be like, wait a minute, this isn't true, you know? And from that, you can pick these things apart. Makes you a better thinker. Gives you the tools that you need to make good decisions, you know? Have to be able to be able to move between subjectivity, objectivity, you know, assess your situation and be able to make a plan, you know, to move forward. As a man, you have to be able to do that. Okay. So it goes on to say, when speaking of the ways to encourage very young Black males to get into journalism, like I said, we encourage them to read. While Carter said that veteran Black male journalists should keep going to schools to speak to students, we need to show up as opposed to just showing up on TV, Carter said. And that is true. Mentorships, being in view and within reach of these people, let them see that you are real, you know, speak with them like you're a real person, not like you're above them, but like you're a real person. You know, whenever I'm doubting myself, you know, or I feel like I can't do a story, you know, I reach out. You know, I've reached out to Dr. T, and I've asked him. I said, you know, hey, you know, I don't know if I can cover this. I don't know if I'm good enough to cover this. And he's like, what do you mean you don't? You can do this. Same thing with Dr. Neal. Tell me the same thing. Go, you can do this. Go do this. You know. And I get out and I go do it, you know, and I do try to do the same thing. I try to reach out and I try to help, you know, these young guys and try to give them some view that they matter and that somebody cares about them. And we all have a duty to do that. This is one aspect of this story that you know, that I am pleased with. That these men see that they have to be visible and they have to get out here and do the good work, because all you hear on social media is that we as Black men are not leading and we're not doing anything. Here's a prime example of how Black men are getting out, trying to solve problems that are unique to Black men and boys, and there's no coverage of it. Besides me seeing this, I haven't heard anything about any of this. Okay? So, like you said, it's Black male journalists thinking about. He says Walker suggests meetings like the ones they were having in that room, professional support groups and group chats to encourage Black male journalists thinking about leaving the business or who want to share their daily victories and losses. Be intentional about encouraging each other, Walker said. Okay. Among the journalists in the room that asked the question, a young man from Connecticut, an intern at a small newspaper, was able to ask the panelists if they had any idea how the young Black men like himself, he's a rising college sophomore, can learn more about the journalism industry. And Walker simply answered, we need to meet them where they are. Okay. Okay. That's the end of the article. I will put that there also. I really wanted to get with that, and you know, that is a brighter end to the situation, where you see that things are being done to try to solve the problem, and it's being done by Black men, and you know, people see it, and people are making an effort to try to resolve some of these issues, and that's just journalism. But it needs to happen, like I say, in a lot of different avenues, because the focus has been placed completely on women's rise, and it's not what we should be doing. You know, I'm fine with women being elevated and being in the room, but if you're in the room and you are pushing things that are antithetical to what is good for our community, but you're there as a representative of our community, then I have an issue with that. You know. If you're a black woman and you're in that room and you're not speaking up for black men who are not in that room, I got a problem with you. You know, black men have advocated for black women to be in the room, and now that they're in the room, they want to be in the room alone. I mean, you heard it in the article. You know, that's what we are. So I'm going to look at some other information before we shut it down. So I, started looking into, the question that I pose is, there's been growing concern over the past years about the decline in the presence of black men on these shows, with regard to politics, just whatever kind of news program that's going on, black men are just not there, on these cable shows and whatnot, like we just covered. And what I found was, what I asked was, well, when did this decline take place? Yeah, we know that it took place in the 2020s, but it goes back even farther than that. It says that the trend appears to have accelerated in the late 2010s and early 2020s. Okay. Hang on. Okay, so I went on and I asked the question. I said, okay, when emphasizing the uplifting of white women and black women and LGBTQ individuals through DEI programs, did that, lead to negative effects, with these black men as far as, these jobs are concerned, because we got to talk about that, because they're always talking about, this whole thing was because of inclusion. And like I said, the number one beneficiary of this DEI emphasis was white women, and historically corporate DEI efforts first prioritized white women from 1980s to the 1990s, talking about these glass ceiling initiatives, okay? This is many early diversity programs were framed around gender equity and benefiting white women mostly, okay? So the benefits that they got were basically, they were the fastest group to close the wage gap, though still not fully equal. The overrepresentation in leadership compared to other marginalized groups, 41% of the managerial roles versus 4% for black men. So white women had 41% of the managerial roles, and 4% of them were black men. Okay, there was less of a stigma around being a diversity hire compared to when a black man was hired. So you see how that would play into these black men being moved out of these situations. And then you look at the punishment that's being levied as the pendulum has swung back. All of the people that are being punished are black men. I mean, black men, black people, they have the black face on DEI, but the DEI was not our come up. It wasn't. Okay, so I wanted to contrast that with black men, okay? While white women rarely face the same levels of skepticism about merit, that black men do. And the DEI for white women is seen as a gender process, while DEI for black men is often framed as racial favoritism. Okay. Number two, black women in DEI, the emphasis. Recent DEI efforts post 2020. So you see that time frame from the 1980s to the 1990s, white women were benefiting, pretty much above all of us. Then you get at the tail end of it in the 2020s, you get highlighted emphasis on black women. As a key focus due to intersectionality, and that's when you see Kimberly Crenshaw's little efforts have come out, and then they start making it to where everybody's situations are similar and they intersect. And intersectionality is in everything. I'm seeing it in medicine. I'm seeing it in nursing. I'm seeing it in everything. Law. It's in everything. And when you hear that, that's just woman speak. Women speak so that they can get some inclusion in there and more emphasis on their experiences as opposed to, everybody else's. Okay. So it goes, says 2020 highlighted women as a key focus due to intersectionality, race, and gender. Slogans like Black Girl Magic and corporate pledges, 15% pledges going towards black women. 15% increase. Okay. The benefits that black women got from DEI: increased media representation, more black female news anchors and executives. Okay. Stronger advocacy networks for black women. Black women-led organizations like Lean In Black Women. Okay, less backlash, so then black women were promoted via DEI, seen as double marginalized, Think about how many times you've heard about that double marginalized status that, and then you see all of these white women, black women. We wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for black women. So they put all that emphasis on them and they put their face out there. But in the background, they were benefiting the most from it. They blame us for black folks for all of the stuff that's been going on with Disney, the change in media, all of the gay stuff that's been going on. They blame black folks for that because when they say woke and DEI and all of that, they see black folks, but they don't see who's actually benefiting from the programs. They don't say, feminism. They don't say that. They see black folks and they're like, we're going to get those black folks. And that's what's happening right now. Okay. Now you contrast that, all those benefits, with black men. Black women are more likely to have been seen as deserving of DEI support, while black men face angry black man stereotypes. Corporate DEI often prioritizes gender over race, so black women benefit from both race and gender initiatives. But if you think about it, you never saw us. There was never any emphasis on black men. There's no emphasis on black men getting educational programs or any of that. But they've been emphasizing that there was a need for that ever since the late 1960s. If we support these black men, get them educational programs, get them all of the resources that they need, i.e. the Monahan report, said all of this stuff. And you know what? They said, no, we're not doing any of that. And they have done none of that. And the same problems are still here. So where, like I said in the last show, the need has been clear and present with black men, they do not do it because black men are seen as a threat in this society and always have been seen as a threat. If black men are doing well, the black community will be doing well. Every time there's been black male leadership, they have always advocated for the community. There has been an uptick in black female leadership. Are they advocating for the black community or are they advocating for themselves? I ask you. I want you to look at everything that you've seen, everything that you hear every day, and I want you to tell me how many times you hear that we need to be doing something for black men in the broadcast and on social media. How many times do you hear that? Okay, so let's move on. Number 3, the LGBTQ plus, including black LGBTQ in DEI and their emphasis. Okay, the DEI programs often separate LGBTQ plus advocacy from racial equity, leading to more resources for queer inclusivity and corporate pride campaigns, gender neutral policies, and LGBTQ plus ERGs are well funded compared to race specific programs. So they got your money. That pie is being separated up, and you're seeing who's getting pieces of the pie and who's getting the smallest piece of the pie, even though the pie was meant for you black folks. Okay? The benefits: visibility in media and politics for more LGBTQ plus characters in TV and politics. So, they're pushing for more visibility, but you see who is basically not benefiting from any of this. Okay. So then you have this strong allyship from liberals that gets into what I talked about in the last show. Who's paying for all of this? Why is it this big push for all of this stuff, all of this feminist stuff and all of this gay stuff? And it's being pushed by these benefactors who are not visible and who don't want to be visible. Okay? They want you to believe that this is organic, that this is all coming from street level, that everybody just wants more inclusivity for these gay folks and more gay, more women. They think all this stuff is supposed to be just organically growing out of nowhere, but that's not what's happening. Okay. The third one is black LGBTQ plus individuals sometimes benefit from both race and queer DEI efforts. So they are getting this double status as well, double beneficiary status. Okay. So then let's contrast that with black men. Straight black men are excluded from LGBTQ plus DEI, missing out on those resources. So this is all about money, okay? LGBTQ plus DEI faces less political backlash than race-based DEI. Fewer bans on LGBTQ training versus CRT bans, okay? Critical race theory is what they're saying, okay? But see, all that's changing under Trump because he's saying, I'm not gonna fund any of this stuff. I'm not gonna do any of this. So that's why you see a lot of black men saying, hey, I'm good with it. This is what you guys deserve because this is what you've been pushing. And we didn't benefit from any of this, so why should I care? Okay? All right, let's move on down. Okay, 4th, black men and DEI emphasis. And their emphasis. They are the least prioritized in modern DEI framework, often left out of gender and race-based conversations. When included, black men are framed as the problem. Examples will be criminal justice reform rather than being seen as leaders. We're seen as being victims of the system, being, persecuted by the system, but we are never shown as having, leadership qualities, So disadvantages, tokenism in hiring. They think that we're tokens. When we're hired, we're not hired because we can do the job. Because we're seen as being less intelligent, and that hasn't changed. Okay. Let's go on. It says seen as diversity hires, but not monitored or mentored for leadership. Not mentored for leadership. That goes across the board in every one of those areas that I talked about: medicine, nursing, teaching. Journalism, all of these key areas that would put us in a place to where we are respected by our children and by our women. We have been excluded from those places, and it's blaring All you hear every day is that we don't measure up. We're the last ones to be looked upon as being an adequate mate. We don't make enough money. We're not manly enough. They think that they can boss us around. They talk to us like we are unimportant. You know, when it's time to talk to a white man, you see a black woman up there getting him told. Okay. All right. They also, there's the lack of advocacy, fewer DEI programs specifically for black men compared to black women / LGBTQ folks. Okay. Highest backlash. Black men get the highest backlash from DEI programs and are polarized, you know, labeled as reverse racism when black men get any kind of benefits. Okay, here are the key points in contrasting black men's, position, benefits from DEI as opposed to everybody else's. Okay, white women have the highest since the 1980s. They are the lowest deserving and the lowest competent in competency. Okay, all right, so then you have black women who are second. They have had the highest emphasis post 2020s. You know, they are moderately deserving. You know, moderately to strongly deserving, and they're seen as being resilient. Okay, the LGBTQ plus folks, you know, they get a high prioritization, and it's corporate friendly. You know, okay, their needs are considered to be moderate. You know, and to support them is seen as being progressive, and they're characterized as brave, whereas black men are at the bottom. Black men's priority is low. You know, their need is high. We're also often seen as aggressive and undeserving. Okay, so then you see why there's this disparity in prioritization of black men. Okay, political acceptability. It's not very politically acceptable for black men to be supported. White women and LGBTQ plus inclusion is less controversial than race-focused DEI. Black men are stereotyped as threatening, making their advancement more contentious. That hasn't changed. That hasn't changed since civil rights wins. Our women don't see us as deserving either, and they say it every day. And we can go into not all and all of that, but the majority of them who speak in public don't speak well of us, no matter what we do. Okay, so we're going to say why, the second part, intersectionality works against black men. Black women benefit from gender plus race advocacy. Black men don't fit neatly into gender or race only DEI. And third, corporate risk aversion. Companies fear backlash if they over prioritize black men, and if you want to, learn more about that, look into anti-affirmative action lawsuits. So in conclusion, while white women, black women, and LGBTQ individuals have seen targeted, well-funded DEI efforts, black men remain under-prioritized and over-scrutinized. DEI programs often exclude straight black men from both race and gender initiatives, leaving them without strong advocacy. Solutions needed: black male-specific mentorship programs, BME community, push back against the DEI only for women LGBTQ narrative, highlight black male success stories outside of sports and entertainment. Okay? All of these things we've been talking about in the Black Manosphere for years. And you know where we get the most pushback from? Black women. That's where we get the most pushback from. You know, we get very little support from our own, and we get even less from the others and the gay folks, you know, and all of these people who have been making millions off of the dead bodies of black men and the struggle and suffering of black men, you know. We talk about, you know, Pauli Murray, and I did a story about her as well, and how she talks about in the documentary, she talks about the way she got into civil rights was because she was tired of seeing black men hanging from trees. She was tired of all of the lynching, the stories, the horrific stories of black men being lynched. So she started working on trying to be legally capable. You know, and as soon as she got legally capable, she gave the keys over to the white women. And the white women supported her, you know, and ultimately she, you know, started trying to add that into, you know, the gay folks, struggle. And, you know, she was also thinking that if we don't rise, she was quoted as saying, if we don't rise together, none of us rise. You know, that thinking is bullshit. It really is. You know, black folks need to stop advocating for everybody else and need to advocate for ourselves. And we need black men in positions of leadership, and women need to either be by our sides or out of the way. Because we've seen what happens when they are left to their own devices. They advocate for themselves. They're not even advocating for children. They're advocating for themselves. More education for them. Not 1 degree is not enough. 2 degrees is not enough. You know, they got to have, some of them got 4 PhDs. And every time they do it, they push it out in your face as if you got to respect them even more than you respect a man who had the same thing. And they talk to you crazy. You know, that's their whole entire identity. Whereas, you know, with men, that's just what I do. That's not indicative of, you know, who I am outside of the job. Really, I might be a whole nother person, you know. I've you know, been in situations where I've you know, been around doctors who were, you know, when everybody was out playing softball, you know, playing on teams and whatnot, just call them doc, and we all just do the same thing, you know. My dad for years played golf with doctors and people of high standing, and they were just men out there. They didn't, you know, push their weight around or anything. They were just men out there communing with each other, you know. But it's not that way. It's just like this impulsiveness about status and being better than the next person. That is just toxic. You want to talk about toxicity? It's not male toxicity. This feminism stuff is toxic. This making men less relevant in the world is ridiculous, and it is having dire ramifications. You know, the worst thing that a man can do is ask a woman out. The worst thing that a man can do is be a colleague and sit right next to the woman who is doing the news program, because she has to be up there by herself. And not only her, how about we have 6 of them up there? You know, that's where we are now. It's, you know, there's a lot in this show that was troubling. I want you guys to, let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I've gone down a rabbit hole. I'm going in the wrong direction. If you think that what I'm saying is not grounded in reality and based on factual information, I want to hear that too. If you think that there are other ways that we can solve this problem, that we can fix the situation that has been plaguing black men and boys forever, I personally don't think that it is helping us with this decline in black male representation in media, in education, in all of these higher fields, for the sake of the elevation of these women. But I don't want to sound like I'm anti-woman. I just feel like this is not equality. This is not equity. This is not inclusion. If there is no place for black men when black men have dire needs. So I'm going to close with that. If you guys enjoy the show, please like, share, and subscribe.
You are listening to Abuki Cabal, the analytical savage.
And I appreciate you guys checking me out. And I hope this was entertaining. And you guys have a great day, night, or evening, whenever you're listening. And I'll see you next time.